The Battle of Tours was fought on October 10th, 732, and it was between Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi, known as Abdurrahman, of the Umayyad Caliphate. And this was the first Sunni caliphate, and a caliphate is an empire. So what these guys were doing is they were conquering all of Europe, and Abdurrahman had excellent heavy cavalry. His men were almost exclusively heavy cavalrymen, and everybody either surrendered or died or ran away. So he was very confident, and he was up against a guy named Charles Martel, known as the Hammer. Now, his position is very complicated, so I'm just going to call him the de facto king of the Franks. The Franks are today's Frenchmen and women. Charles was one of the most successful military commanders of all time because he broke all the rules, and he won every single battle except for his first. He studied why he lost, and he figured out how he was going to win from then on. He did a couple of things that were completely unheard of during the era. He recruited civilian militia, and he trained them to the level of professional infantry. These are infantrymen. At this battle, Charles had no heavy cavalry. Charles prepared for this battle for 10 years. So he trained his militiamen for 10 years, and he left professional soldiers at these villages where the militias were to train them, and they kept their level of training up, for a full 10 years. And in the meantime, Charles and his professionals were going all over Francia and consolidating his power. So when Abdurrahman arrived to head off to Tours and sack Tours, Charles was waiting for him. And Charles achieved complete surprise. Abdurrahman had scouts and spies and all that, but Charles infiltrated his main force into the battlefield in front of Abdurrahman, and he infiltrated them in small units, so they were undetected. He didn't come marching up with, supplies and all of that, flags waving, trumpets going, the way everybody else did. Charles positioned his main body of infantry on an area of ground above Abdurrahman's men, and he positioned them so that they had trees sort of screening them slightly, and they had no cavalry. And during this period, the conventional wisdom was that infantrymen could not withstand attacks by heavy cavalry. Well, Charles had trained his men to withstand attacks by heavy cavalry. So Abdurrahman attacked. His cavalry had to go uphill, and they had to go around trees and everything, so they're at a massive disadvantage. And Charles's men stood firm. When the cavalry broke through the infantry, I think a couple of times, Charles was surrounded by his best warriors. He was on a white horse, so he stood out. He was wearing his golden crown, so everybody knew who he was. He rode a horse simply so that he could be above the battlefield, above everybody else, and see what was going on. So every time the Abdurrahman's cavalry broke through, Charles's professional infantrymen killed them all. And the Umayyads could not make a dent in this defensive phalanx, and That was another thing Charles did. He adopted a defensive position, a defensive formation. So Abdraman thought that the Franks were desperate and they were crazy. They'd sent infantrymen out against heavy cavalrymen, and so he was way overconfident. Now, while these fruitless battles were going on, Charles's heavily armed, highly trained militiamen infiltrated through the trees, hidden, screened by the forest. They infiltrated around behind the Abdraman's encampment. And the way people fought during this era was that they sacked every city that they conquered. They took booty and they took slaves. So at the back of the camp was all the booty, and there were all the slaves in chains and all of that. So what Charles' militia did is that they infiltrated around to the back. They freed the slaves. They armed the slaves, and they prepared. And in front, Charles had men who he had trained to speak Arabic, and they started shouting, "They're taking our booty! Retreat! Run away! Run away!" And during this period, booty was the main reason you fought, because you could steal a hell of a lot, gold and silk, just a heck of a lot of stuff. So Abdraman's men broke off the attack and ran to the back of their camp to save their booty. And there they were met by armed slaves and Charles's heavily armed, highly trained militia, and they were slaughtered. And what happened was that Abdraman's own bodyguard deserted him, and Charles's men ran in and killed him. And basically, an imagined retreat became a real retreat. And so the Battle of Tours is one of history's most decisive battles, and it was won by completely unconventional tactics used against a totally overconfident enemy. Charles Martel was known as the Hammer. Now, a lot of you are worried about this alleged hammer and something else, scorecard. Well, I'm not worried in the slightest, and you shouldn't be worried either. Why not? Da 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 da! CISA! I told you nobody knows about this. CISA was established to fight cyber interference in elections. So, if somebody is messing around with the votes, CISA will track it down. CISA has far more powerful solutions, as they call them, at their fingertips, in their arsenal, in their quivers, than the CIA has. You folks give the CIA way too much credit. The CIA has an almost unbroken record of failure. Individual agents are perfectly capable, as are the special activities people. But the whoever would do something like that, I mean, it's more political suicide. It's legal suicide. So you've got to remember, we were prepared for this. So stop worrying. Don't even talk about it anymore. I'm going to end with a speech that Winston Churchill gave to the House of Commons on June 18th, 1940. And this is how the speech ends. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that, if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will say, this was their finest hour. All Trump supporters are bearing themselves fine. I see no violence. I see no riots. We're all waiting because we trust the Trump. And the opposition doesn't trust anyone. They're already having a civil war. So it's a massive civil war. It's the moderate Democrats versus the progressive Democrats versus Antifa BLM. So we are united, except for Mitt Romney, of course, and they are completely imploding. This whole thing was an implosion. All is well. Click.